Welcome back. This is Brad Hammer again from the Internship and Placement Office. In this job skills webinar series, we're going to be talking about interviewing. Interviewing is one of those areas that honestly you really need to prepare and you really need to practice, and the more that you practice, the better that you're going to get. So we're going to be talking about a couple of tips in order to improve your interviewing skills and make sure that you're ready to nail the interview. Before I really get started into all of those tips, I want to make sure that I highlight we have mock interview day, which is exactly that, being able to practice and get feedback on your interviewing skills from professionals in the industry. And it's going to be on Friday, the day after your career fair. Friday, January 22nd from 1 to 4, and you need to register for mock interview day through Euler Connection. If you have questions about that, you can stop by our office, 113 Old Main, or you can give me a call or email hammer@findlay.edu, 419-434-6922. All right, now let's go ahead and get into the interviewing webinar series. So, other practice opportunities. All of you are going to be going out on your clinicals here at going to be relatively soon. So I always recommend, once you're kind of getting acclimated and you've started in your clinical rotation, I recommend asking your clinical instructor if, one, they would be willing to review your resume, and then also if they would be able to sit down with you so that you could do an informational / mock interview with them. To have that, then they can critique you. You're in that kind of still learning mode, and then being able to interview with somebody specifically in the industry. And if you do really well, I will tell you that students in the past who have asked their clinical instructor for an informational interview, even though you feel like it's a mock, they're treating it as a real thing. And and even in mock interview day, we've had students that have been offered opportunities based on their mock interview. So you always want to make sure that you take advantage of those opportunities because even though it's practice, if you do really well and they have an opportunity, it may end up turning into the real thing. So going into an interview, I always recommend, again, having a specific plan, making sure that you practice beforehand, make sure that you're researching the organization so that you're able to answer at least the three basic main questions that more often than not in an interview you're going to be asked. So in the PowerPoint I have all of those specific questions, but I'll just go over them really quickly. 1, tell me a little bit about yourself. 2, why do you want to work for this organization? And then 3, what about this specific position interests you the most, or why are you interested in this specific position? So if you're not able to very clearly describe or answer all of those 3 questions, then you're going to be in a little bit of trouble, and the interview more than likely won't go as well as it could. So the one I'm going to kind of talk about a little bit, because it seems to trip students up a lot, is tell me a little bit about yourself. Why do you want to work here, and what interests you most about these positions? You're going to have to go to the organization's website and pick out a couple of things that interest you as to why you want to work there. It can't just be, well, I need a job and I want to be a PT. No, you really need to make sure that you're researching the organization as to why you want to work there. And then same thing with the specific position. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Can be tricky because you can go in a number of different directions, and at times students have a tendency to divulge too much personal information. So I always recommend kind of starting the tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of working chronologically to say, this is where you grew up, in whatever the city or the state was. And then start into when you started or when you kind of developed the interest in your specific field. So physical therapy. When did you start to have that interest, or how did you develop that interest in being a physical therapist? Which led you to coming here to the university in order to get your doctorate degree. and talk about a little bit of, or some of the skills that you've developed as, or the, just even personal development that you've, how you've grown as an individual while you've been at the university, through your clinical experience, and then which has led you to the specific opportunity and why you're so excited about this specific opportunity to work at whatever the organization is that you're interviewing with. So again, chronologically work through the tell me a little bit about yourself, leaving out all of those kind of personal details that employers really aren't allowed to ask anyway. So the other questions, or some of the other questions, you really can go online and there's like literally thousands of questions that you can look through, which is honestly, I think it's a good idea to look through and familiarize yourself with typical or common questions that you might be asked outside of these three. But in general, I always recommend going into an interview with having a plan for what you want to say. So, you have 5, 10 specific examples of times when you've utilized skills, you've taken on leadership roles, you've had to problem solve. Have those specific examples of those skill sets. So you have to do a little bit of a self-assessment going into an interview so that you have a plan for what you want to say. And more often than not, during the course of the interview, you're going to have the opportunity to tell them what you wanted to say or what you wanted to tell them from the very beginning. The interview is not the time to be overly meek or modest. You really want to make sure that you're confident in your skills, in your abilities, and you're able to articulate essentially why they should hire you. This is the last step. And if you're not able to convince them that you're the best person for the job, then they're gonna go with somebody else. So, like I said, make sure you have a plan for what you want to say and essentially why they should hire you for this specific position. I get lots of questions about, what to wear, what type of interview questions am I potentially going to be asked. Again, there's lots of questions that are out there. The behavioral-based questions seem to be more and more common, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your organization or the place where you're going to be working is going to ask you those behavioral-based questions. So, for example, give me a time or tell me about a time when you had to overcome or you had to work, problem solve, leadership, all of these specific, like tell me about a time when you had to use this specific skill or you were put in this specific type of situation. Use your communication skills, work with difficult people. All of those are things that you potentially would be asked in a behavioral-based question or a behavioral-based interview. So having those specific examples, like I was saying before, and having a plan for what you want to say is really important. Really important. Traditional questions, they can be a little bit more rehearsed. So, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Also, like I was saying before, why should we hire you for this position? Those types of questions, yes, you may have to answer, and you also will have to answer questions based on your experience and what you have done in the field and directly relate them to why you're going to be successful within this specific role that you're interviewing for. So the things that you can control or the things that you can manage, making sure that you're doing your homework is one of them, and looking at and making sure that you have a plan for what you want to say. Also, dressing professionally. For men, honestly, I think it's a lot easier, suit, tie, and dress shoes, dress socks, the whole nine. For women, it can be a little bit more difficult to find professional and appropriate attire, especially the length of skirt, also how tight fitting. You want to make sure you stay away for attire, anything that's too tight, too revealing, as conservative as possible. again, because you never know who you're going to be interviewing with, and that first impression really does make a difference. So make sure if you don't have a suit, go out and get a suit that fits well and is professional. Also, other things that I always recommend when you're going into the interview, sometimes it takes a trial run to maybe just go by, or if you haven't been to the organization yet, to look at, or how long it's going to take you to get there, what type of parking. Again, the last thing that you would want is to go into an interview and be all discombobulated because you didn't think it was going to take as long to get there. You thought you were going to have at least 10 minutes of kind of time before your interview started, and you just rush in there, and it's tough to kind of collect your thoughts and to be able to articulate what you want to say. So take care of those things beforehand. Know how long it's going to take. Make sure that you account for traffic if it is in a high traffic area. Same thing with parking. Look into all of those things beforehand so that you have a plan for when you need to leave, and make sure that, like I said, you're dressed appropriately and professionally. Another common thing that interviewers tell me, or that I always kind of ask for feedback from employers, is honestly the lack of interview or candidates that actually follow up with a thank you. So even if it is through email, that's appropriate, but I have kind of a trick, if you will, that I recommend. Or a tip that I recommend. So having a thank you card that you go to Hallmark or Walmart or wherever and get a stack of thank you cards. And when you go into the interview, have that either in your car or in your bag or whatever, and then before you leave, finish your thank you. Everything will still be very fresh. You can kind of make reference to maybe something that you were really impressed with or that you really appreciated at the interview. Thank them and tell them that you really look forward to the opportunity to work with them, and then seal it and give it to the receptionist or whoever is out front and ask them to put the thank you and give a thank you to each individual that you interviewed with. Same thing with if the time frame, and then they'll make sure that they get it within a reasonable amount of time. Relying on snail mail, I wouldn't recommend, because you never know, they might already make a decision before they even get the thank you. So send a thank you, follow up, that's very important. And at the end of the interview, you also want to make sure that you have questions prepared to ask them. I'll make sure that on the PowerPoint there's some examples of specific questions that you can ask, but at the end of the interview, and they ask you if you have any questions, this is not the time to just be kind of relax, I made it through. This really is your time. This is your opportunity to just show again that you've done your homework, and that if nothing else, I recommend asking advice or specific types of advice to whomever you're interviewing. So things like, why do you like working for this specific organization? What skills and abilities have contributed to your success? What type of journals or websites do you frequently visit in order to make sure that you stay on top of all of the things that are happening within the industry? Show that you have this passion and hunger to want to continue to learn and continue to grow within the organization, and ask them how they got to where they're at, and taking those specific advice, those pieces of advice. So I know that I went through a lot of this relatively quickly, but interviewing really this is your opportunity to market yourself, and you want to make sure that you prepare, you want to make sure that you practice going into an interview, know what you want to say, be able to answer those 3 common questions, dress professionally, have questions to ask them at the end, send a thank you, and thank you for joining me for this webinar series and the job search skills strategies on networking.